The hidden pianist. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Emma Clark's modest San Francisco apartment as her fingers danced across the worn keys of an old upright piano. At 35, she possessed an unassuming beauty, auburn hair that caught the light, gentle eyes that held depths of untold stories, and hands that moved with the grace of someone born to create music. She finished Chopin's Nocturne with a delicate flourish, then glanced at her watch. "Already 8:30, she muttered, closing the piano lid reluctantly. "I'll be late again." Emma's apartment sat in one of San Francisco's older neighborhoods, where Victorian houses had been divided into affordable units. It wasn't much, but her landlord had allowed her to keep the old piano, and that was all that mattered. She rushed to change from her comfortable home clothes into her work uniform, a simple beige cardigan and black slacks required for her job at Harmony Music School, where she taught piano to children. It wasn't the prestigious concert career she'd once dreamed of, but it kept her connected to the music she loved. 20 years ago, Emma had been a prodigy at the San Francisco Conservatory, destined for greatness. The daughter of a single mother who had sacrificed everything for her education, Emma had been on track to become one of the classical world's rising stars. But then life intervened, her mother's sudden illness, mounting medical bills, and the impossible choice between her dreams and caring for the woman who had given her everything. By the time her mother passed away, Emma's savings were gone, and the momentum of her early career had faded like morning fog. Music is still music, her mother had told her in those final days, whether you play at Carnegie Hall or in our living room. It's what's in your heart that matters. Emma had carried those words with her, finding joy in teaching children and playing at small community events. The elite classical world that had once been within her reach now seemed like a distant dream. As she hurried down the street with coffee in hand, her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, her closest friend since childhood. "Don't forget about tonight. Symphony fundraiser, I got you that catering gig. Good money, plus you'll get to hear some amazing music. Wear something nice." Emma had almost forgotten. Sarah worked as an event coordinator for the San Francisco Symphony and had pulled strings to get Emma a serving job at the exclusive fundraiser. The extra money would help with rent, though the thought of being surrounded by the world she'd once belonged to filled her with both longing and apprehension. Arriving at the music school, Emma greeted her first student with a warm smile. 8-year-old Lily was just learning "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," and her enthusiasm reminded Emma why she loved teaching. "Remember," Emma told her student, guiding small fingers to the correct keys, "music isn't about impressing others. It's about expressing what's in your heart." As Lily's simple melody filled the practice room, Emma felt the familiar warmth that music always brought her. Tonight would be different, she would be serving wealthy patrons instead of performing, but she would still be surrounded by the classical music that remained her first love. Little did she know that this evening would change everything. The elegant trap. The Grand Opera House concert hall glittered with crystal chandeliers and gilded moldings. Women in designer gowns and men in tailored tuxedos mingled with champagne flutes in hand, their cultured laughter mixing with gentle notes from a string quartet. Emma felt painfully out of place in her simple black dress and beige cardigan as she balanced a tray of canapés. She'd pinned her auburn hair up in an attempt at elegance, but she knew she still looked like what she was, someone who didn't belong. "Remember to smile," the catering manager had instructed. "These people are donating thousands to the symphony tonight." Emma moved through the crowd, offering hors d'oeuvres and trying to blend into the background. Her eyes, however, kept drifting to the magnificent Steinway grand piano positioned in the adjoining recital room. Its polished ebony surface gleamed under the lights, calling to her like an old friend. "Quite the beauty, isn't it?" a voice beside her remarked. Emma turned to find an elderly woman watching her with knowing eyes. Despite her designer attire, there was something genuine about her expression. "It's magnificent," Emma replied, unable to hide her admiration. "You play?" the woman asked. "I used to. Now I just teach," Emma answered with a small smile. "What a shame," the woman said, her tone sincere. "I'm Eleanor Winters, by the way. Board member." "Emma Clark," she responded, surprised by the introduction. Just helping with the catering tonight. Eleanor chuckled. Music doesn't care about job titles, my dear. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a group of conservatory students led by a tall man with perfectly styled hair and an air of cultivated superiority. This was Victor Ashworth, the youngest department chair in the San Francisco Conservatory's history and the evening's featured performer. "Ah, Eleanor," he greeted, kissing the elderly woman's cheek. "I've been looking for you. I wanted to discuss the program changes." His eyes briefly landed on Emma, dismissing her instantly as staff. He plucked a canopy from her tray without acknowledging her presence. "Victor, this is Emma Clark," Eleanor said pointedly. "She's a pianist as well." Victor's eyebrows rose slightly. "Is that so? Professional?" "I teach beginners," Emma answered, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. Victor smiled thinly. "How charming. Always good to have people introducing the basics to children." One of his students snickered, and Emma fought the urge to shrink away. "Not everyone can handle the rigors of true classical training," Victor continued. "It takes a certain caliber of musician." Emma knew she should stay quiet, just nod and move on. But something, perhaps Eleanor's encouraging presence or the dismissive tone in Victor's voice, made her speak. "True musical understanding goes beyond technical training," she said quietly. Victor's smile froze. "Excuse me? I just mean that technique without heart is empty," Emma elaborated, immediately regretting her words. Victor's expression hardened. An interesting perspective from someone serving appetizers. "Tell me, where did you study?" "I was at the conservatory, actually," Emma replied. "Years ago." "Were you?" His tone was laced with doubt. "And yet here you are." "Well, I suppose that illustrates my point perfectly." Eleanor's expression darkened. "Victor." "It's fine," Emma interjected. "I should get back to work." As she turned to leave, Victor called after her, "You know, we'll be having an impromptu performance session after the formal program. Staff are welcome to observe from the back, if you'd like to see what heart combined with actual skill looks like." Emma could feel the stares of wealthy patrons, students, and other staff. She nodded stiffly and moved away, her face burning with humiliation. "Don't let him get to you," Eleanor whispered as she passed. "That man's talent is overshadowed only by his ego." But the damage was done. Emma spent the next hour serving drinks, Victor's dismissal weighing heavily on her shoulders. She had no idea that this humiliation was only the beginning of what would become the most important night of her life. The challenge. The formal portion of the fundraiser concluded with Victor Ashworth performing a technically flawless Liszt piece that earned enthusiastic applause. As the scheduled program ended, the evening transitioned to a more relaxed atmosphere, with guests moving between the reception area and the recital room. Emma was clearing champagne flutes when she overheard Victor holding court near the piano, surrounded by an attentive group of wealthy donors. "The problem with music education today," he was saying, "is that we've lowered our standards. Everyone believes they can be a pianist with a few lessons and passion." He made air quotes around the word, earning chuckles from his audience. Eleanor Winters stood at the edge of the group, her expression disapproving. When she caught Emma's eye, she gave her an encouraging nod. "What we need is more rigor, more discipline," Victor continued. "Like we had in the classical traditions." "Some would argue that rigidity stifles creativity," Eleanor interjected. Victor laughed dismissively. "Creativity without foundation is just noise, Eleanor. You need to master the rules before you can break them." The conversation might have continued along these academic lines had the catering manager not approached Emma at that moment. "We're short-staffed for cleanup. Can you stay an extra hour?" he asked loudly enough to interrupt the nearby discussion. All eyes turned to Emma as she nodded, acutely aware of the attention. "Ah, our pianist turned server," Victor said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me, what was your perspective on my interpretation of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody?" As a former student of the conservatory, surely you have some insight. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. The room seemed to hold its breath as Emma carefully set down her tray. It was technically perfect, she said quietly. Victor's smile widened. Thank you. But it lacked heart, Emma finished. A shocked murmur ran through the assembled guests. Victor's expression darkened. Heart, he repeated. That nebulous quality amateurs cling to when they can't master technique. Emma knew she should stop, apologize, and return to work. But something about Victor's smug certainty ignited a spark of defiance she hadn't felt in years. Music isn't just about playing notes correctly, she said. It's about making them mean something. Victor's eyes narrowed. Easy to critique from the sidelines, isn't it? Why don't you show us this heart you keep mentioning? He gestured toward the Steinway, a provocative smile playing on his lips. I'm working, Emma said, glancing at her catering manager, who looked mortified. I'm sure your employer would excuse you for a moment of cultural education, Victor pressed. Unless, of course, you're all talk. Eleanor stepped forward. Victor, that's enough. But he was on a roll now, playing to his audience. One piece. Your choice. Show us this emotional quality that apparently my playing lacks. The challenge hung in the air like a suspended cord waiting for resolution. Emma felt trapped, cornered by her own words and Victor's manipulation. She glanced around the room, at the wealthy patrons watching with curious amusement, at Victor's students snickering behind their hands, at Eleanor's concerned expression. I don't think, Emma began. Just as I thought, Victor interrupted smoothly. It's always easier to criticize than to perform. Perhaps you should stick to teaching Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and leave the real music to those of us who've earned the right. The insult hung in the air, followed by uncomfortable laughter from some of the guests. Emma felt the familiar sting of dismissal, the same feeling that had driven her from the classical world years ago. But this time, something was different. This time, she was tired of being invisible, tired of letting others define her worth. She looked at the piano, her old friend, her first love, and felt a familiar stirring in her chest. One piece, she said quietly, stepping forward. The room fell silent. Victor's confident smile flickered for just a moment before returning full force. Excellent, he said. This should be educational. As Emma walked toward the piano, she could feel every eye in the room following her. Her heart pounded, but her steps were steady. She was about to remind everyone, including herself, who she really was. The performance. Emma approached the Steinway with quiet dignity, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The magnificent instrument seemed to welcome her, its ebony surface reflecting the crystal chandeliers above. She adjusted the bench slightly, a pianist's ritual that felt as natural as breathing. The room had fallen completely silent. Wealthy donors craned their necks for a better view, while Victor's students exchanged skeptical glances. Victor himself stood with arms crossed, his expression a mixture of amusement and anticipation of her failure. Emma placed her hands gently on the keys, feeling their familiar weight and texture. For a moment, she closed her eyes and let herself remember, not the years of struggle and compromise, but the pure joy she'd felt the first time she'd touched a piano as a child. When she opened her eyes, her gaze briefly met Eleanor's. The older woman nodded encouragingly, and Emma felt a spark of her old confidence return. She began with Debussy's Clair de Lune, not flashy or technically overwhelming, but a piece that demanded something far more difficult than mere precision, genuine emotion and interpretive depth. The first notes floated through the air like whispered secrets. Emma's touch was impossibly delicate, each phrase shaped with the care of someone who understood that music was a language of the soul. Her fingers moved with fluid grace, drawing sounds from the piano that seemed almost otherworldly. The transformation was immediate and stunning. Gone was the nervous server in the beige cardigan. In her place sat a true artist, someone who didn't just play the notes but lived them. Her body swayed slightly with the music's natural rhythm, her face serene yet deeply concentrated. As the piece progressed, Emma began to add subtle interpretations that revealed the depth of her musical understanding. She lingered on certain phrases, allowing them to breathe and develop naturally. Her dynamic control was exquisite, passages that whispered like moonlight followed by moments that sang with quiet passion. The audience was mesmerized. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses remained frozen halfway to lips. Even the catering staff had stopped working to listen. Victor's confident smile had long since faded. His arms had uncrossed, and he leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting from skepticism to confusion to something approaching awe. This wasn't amateur playing. This was artistry of the highest caliber. Emma moved into the piece's most challenging section, where Debussy's complex harmonies required not just technical skill but profound musical intelligence. Her left hand provided a foundation that seemed to shimmer and shift like actual moonlight on water, while her right hand sang the melody with heartbreaking tenderness. Eleanor Winters had tears in her eyes. Several other audience members were visibly moved, some dabbing at their faces with silk handkerchiefs. As the piece approached its conclusion, Emma allowed each note to resonate fully, creating a sense of infinite space and time. The final chord hung in the air like a blessing, gradually fading until the silence felt sacred. For several long moments, no one moved. The spell was too complete, too perfect to break with something as crude as applause. When the silence finally ended, it was Eleanor who began clapping, slow, deliberate applause that spoke of deep appreciation rather than mere approval. Others joined in, and soon the room erupted in enthusiastic recognition of what they had just witnessed. Emma sat quietly at the piano, her hands folded in her lap, seemingly surprised by the intensity of the response. She had simply played music, something she did every day, but somehow, in this moment, in this place, it had become something transcendent. Victor stood frozen, his face pale with shock and something that might have been shame. His students looked between him and Emma with wide eyes, clearly recognizing that they had just witnessed something their professor, for all his technical skill, had never achieved. The woman in the beige cardigan had just reminded everyone what true musical genius looked like. And she had done it not with flashy technique or academic posturing, but with the one thing that couldn't be taught, a heart that understood music's deepest truths. The resolution. The applause seemed to last forever, but eventually it faded, leaving Emma sitting at the piano in a bubble of profound silence. She rose gracefully from the bench, smoothing her simple black dress, and began to step away from the instrument. "Wait," Victor's voice cut through the quiet. His earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by something raw and honest. That was. He struggled for words, his usual eloquence failing him completely. Emma turned to face him, her expression neither triumphant nor bitter, simply serene. "That was extraordinary," Eleanor Winters said, approaching with tears still glistening in her eyes. "My dear, where on earth have you been hiding?" "I haven't been hiding," Emma replied softly. "I've been teaching children to love music. I've been playing at community centers and church services. I've been living with music every day, just not on stages like this." A well-dressed man in an expensive suit stepped forward. "I'm David Chen, conductor of the San Francisco Symphony. Miss Clark, that was. I've rarely heard Debussy interpreted with such profound understanding. Would you consider auditioning for our upcoming season? We have several concerto spots that." "I appreciate the offer," Emma interrupted gently, "but I'm quite happy where I am." Victor finally found his voice. "I owe you an apology," he said, his face flushed with embarrassment. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about what makes music meaningful." He paused, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily. "You have a gift that I don't think I understand." Emma studied his face for a moment, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes. "Music isn't a competition, Victor. It never was. When we make it about proving ourselves rather than sharing something beautiful, we lose what makes it magical in the first place. One of Victor's students, a young woman who had been among those snickering earlier, stepped forward hesitantly. "Miss Clark? Could I possibly take lessons with you? I think I need to learn what you just showed us." Before Emma could respond, several other conservatory students had gathered around, their earlier mockery replaced by genuine curiosity and respect. Eleanor placed a gentle hand on Emma's arm. "My dear, I have a proposition. The Symphony Board has been discussing our community outreach programs. We need someone to develop a new initiative, bringing classical music to underserved communities, teaching in schools that can't afford quality music education. The position would include a substantial salary and, of course, opportunities to perform with the symphony when you desired." Emma's eyes widened. That sounds wonderful, but... "Think about it," Eleanor said with a knowing smile. "You've spent years giving music to others. Perhaps it's time to let others give something back to you." As the evening wound down, Emma found herself surrounded by people who wanted to know more about her story, her music, her teaching. The catering manager, who had been terrified earlier, now beamed with pride as if he had discovered her personally. Sarah appeared at Emma's side, having watched the entire performance from the doorway. "So," she said with a grin, "still think you're just a piano teacher?" Emma laughed, the first truly joyful sound she'd made all evening. "I am a piano teacher. I'm also a musician. Maybe I'm learning that those things aren't as different as I thought." As she gathered her things to leave, Victor approached one final time. "Miss Clark, Emma, would you consider giving a masterclass at the conservatory? I think my students could learn a great deal from you." "I know I could." Emma considered this for a moment. "I'd be honored," she said. "But on one condition." "Anything." "We start with, 'Twinkle, twinkle, little star.' Sometimes the most profound truths are found in the simplest music." Victor actually smiled, not his practiced, superior smile, but something genuine and humble. "I think that's exactly where we should start." 3 months later, Emma stood before a packed recital hall at the San Francisco Conservatory. She was giving her first public recital in over 2 decades, but this time it was different. In the audience were her students, both the children she'd been teaching for years and the conservatory students who now sought her guidance. Eleanor Winters sat in the front row, beaming with pride. As Emma placed her hands on the keys of the concert grand, she thought of her mother's words, "Music is still music, whether you play at Carnegie Hall or in our living room. It's what's in your heart that matters." She began to play, not to prove anything or impress anyone, but simply to share the joy that had sustained her through all the difficult years. And in that sharing, she found something she had thought was lost forever, the pure, uncompromised love of music that had called to her since childhood. The young girl who had once dreamed of concert halls had become something even better, musician who understood that the greatest performance isn't about technical perfection, but about touching hearts and changing lives, one note at a time. The end.